fired from Sub-Basement D of a major motion picture studio. The development executives must go to the last places in Hollywood with money. Now streaming, Reboot It!
Okay, that's a little bit too much. I don't need all this fanfare. You could just shut the music down. Can we turn the music? It's a little loud. The music is a little loud. Just tell me your names, and we're gonna go from there. Okay? Just tell me your names. I am producer Bill.
I am Billy Business.
Wow, I am Ron Swallow.
And I am Ed Greer.
Well, I'm George. Nice to meet you guys. It's a pleasure to have you here. Listen, you might know I kind of got out of the movie business. It went pretty well for me, you know. Some strikes, some gutters. Right now, I kind of have a desire to get back into the business, and I've been looking at, what could I buy for a couple billion spare dollars laying around like, most people have. And I think I came up with a pretty good idea, and I want to see if this Netflix thing is for real or not. Okay.
George Lucas, Netflix, sign me up, whatever it is.
Yeah, there's no way that can fail.
Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. I made 3 movies in the 90s that people did not care for, if you don't remember. So let's keep that in mind. But listen, I want to do a superhero movie, but I don't want to do a superhero movie for anyone else. I want to buy a superhero, and then I want to make the movie for me. And so I went back to a character that I loved in my childhood, and that is Ultraman. Ultraman from Japan.
Really?
That's I hadn't thought about that one.
That's interesting.
I thought you were going to say Captain Planet, but this works.
Oh man. Well, you could leave if you don't want to do Ultraman.
No.
No.
I'm very much into Ultraman.
Okay, because I'm a nice guy, but we do things around here my way. Okay, so just let's be clear about that. Totally fair. Totally fair.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, we don't want to be kicked out and be sleeping on the beach. I mean, I hate sand.
Don't tempt fate. Don't tempt fate.
Oh, that's clever. That's real clever. You're on thin ice there, Ultra Greer. That's cute, though. I like that. So I need you guys to just start brainstorming, okay? Because I threw a couple billion over at the people at Subaraya Productions and Chayo Productions. I settled about a 30-year dispute that they were having over the licensing rights, and now I own that bitch. So let's get down to business with Ultraman. I'm going to check back in on you guys. Give me some ideas for this big Netflixy project. You know what I mean? Okay. I'll talk to you guys soon. Goodbye.
Wow. Cool. Interesting.
This is aside from the fact that we're working with George Lucas, guys, this is a
Skywalker Ranch. Wow.
Crazy stuff. This is a really interesting property, though, because Ultraman is actually one of the biggest superheroes in the world that probably nobody knows about. So let's just kind of go around the horn. What is your experience with Ultraman?
I've seen 2 episodes of the 60s TV show, and then I saw on Wikipedia that there's like 40, 50 plus more years of spinoffs so really almost nothing.
Okay, Ron?
Well, I've watched the cartoon on Netflix, and I also watched a couple of the original episodes from the first series, which is bananas, by the way. Just completely bananas. Totally fun.
Mm-hmm. Ed?
I did, like I said, I tried to do no research, and it just found me anyway. So I read a couple issues of the Marvel comic drawn by, I think, Salvador LaRocca. I watched a big compilation of the 60s jazz. So I get it. He could do it for 3 minutes or whatever, and he chops the guys. Okay, whatever. I got that, and then I started looking at some of the versions of where the Ultramen come from, and I sparked to that kind of a lot, actually. So I'll just leave that at that. But so that's kind of overall what I know about Ultraman. He gets big, he fights kaiju.
Well, and he's an alien.
And he's an alien. Like I said, that part is intriguing to me, and we'll get to that.
Indeed. So I grew up catching reruns of the old 60s show on TV. I think my brother actually was more into it than I was growing up. But I always loved the aesthetic of Ultraman. I just think it's one of the coolest character designs like in the history of pop culture. That said, I also have a huge appreciation for Ultraman's place in the history of pop culture because it is kind of gigantic. And maybe we should just get into this up front. Ultraman is kind of the Superman meets Batman of Japan. He has like the standing in history of Superman and the coolness factor of Batman. The character was created in the 1960s and literally was created because producers of the Godzilla movies were trying to figure out what to do with all these miniatures that they had in their studios. And so they came up with the idea of doing a giant monster fighting television series. And over the course of development, they finally settled on this character who was originally called Redman, and then in the original Japanese, Urutoraman. And Ultraman was Shin Hayata, who was a member of the Science Patrol, which was a government organization dedicated to fighting giant monsters from space. Shin Hayata secretly had melded with an alien entity called Ultraman. And when he pressed a specific capsule that he carried around in his pocket with him, he could grow to 150 feet tall with super strength, very impact-resistant skin, and the ability to fly and shoot the spacium ray when he crossed his arms in front of him. The thing about Ultraman is it became literally a Japanese cultural icon. Ultraman is not only a character, Ultraman had a charity that was one of the leading sort of disaster relief charities in Japan for 50 years. Ultraman has a Guinness World Record for number of spin-off shows, 37 and counting, following the original 1966 series. Ultraman has had about 50 different variations of the character across a multiverse from different planets. It creates an entire family. I mean, we are knee-deep in lore here. And Ultraman is still incredibly popular in Japan. There is a best-selling manga series. The anime series that is on Netflix right now was huge when it premiered in Japan. The problem is there just has not been a ton of crossover. Ultraman, for reasons that George Lucas alluded to, has been tied up as far as licensing rights. And so there really hasn't been any faithful American adaptations. And you know how American audiences feel about foreign products. So this is where we find ourselves. And honestly, this is one of the big challenges for the Reboot Crew. We have never done a legitimately foreign property before. And I think that there's a lot of minefields here. So I would ask the group, how are we feeling about this?
Oh, man. Here's the thing. All that being said, I guess the first question I want to ask is, like, who are we making this for? Because the episodes that I saw very much looks like a kid's show, or it looked a little zany, but I know that it gets a lot more serious. I guess that kind of is like Batman in a certain way, because it's just like I just think the average American viewer probably doesn't even know who Ultraman is, but we're also making these for a global audience, so it's like, does it even matter?
It's a fair point. I mean, I think it matters in so much as we kind of have to do the opposite thing that the anime is doing. The anime is essentially positioning itself as a sequel to the 37 other sequels, which I feel like makes it pretty impenetrable from a lore standpoint. Again, I haven't watched a lot of it. I'm sure they handle it as deftly as they can, but that's a lot of homework you're asking an audience to do, especially if we're thinking about this for an American audience or a non-Southeast Asian audience. Ed, Ron, I don't know, initial thoughts? Where are your heads at?
I mean, just be respectful to the property, come up with some cool ideas. I mean, it's kind of I mean, while there is tons of lore, just like you said, there is also a very simple idea, which is that an alien comes down and wants to help us protect ourselves against other aliens and monsters and kaiju trying to destroy our Earth. And then, you got a superhero who fights kaijus. I mean, that leaves you a lot of room. If you have those things in there, you can form a whole story around that. Maybe kaijus have a reason for what they're doing, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like we can do a respectful idea that even adds some extra nuance to it.
Who are we making this for, though, Ron, in your opinion?
Anybody who likes monsters and dudes fighting them.
So I think that's specifically like an American audience. I think we're going to trend toward we're doing this for an American audience. And I think it's going to be a bit of a tightrope. You know, anytime I feel like we're wading into dangerous waters, and Ghost in the Shell is foremost on my mind, but even things like Battle Angel Alita, anytime you try to westernize these anime properties, it's a little bit sticky. So we'll just have to keep that front of mind. Ed, thoughts?
Not just because it would be a Japanese product, but I would like an Asian actor to be the main dude. But I think if it's westernized in my mind these days, the new Western is multiple groups of people contributing to something, and that science team that Shin is part of when he changes into Ultraman, that's a perfect opportunity for us to westernize like some of those roles, have like black people, Indians, whoever, and then the main dude still be a fresh Asian dude that we can break as a star in this movie.
All very fair. So let's ask the question, since we're doing this for Netflix, you know, are we thinking series? Are we thinking miniseries? Are we thinking film? Are we thinking film series? Do we want to leave that fluid for the time being? What are we thinking?
I'd like to weigh in on that and say movie, period, because it's got so much lore. I really think our task is, like you said earlier, Bill, it's not to do a book report for everybody about all the stuff that happened. It's to tell Western people, this is so cool, look at it. I think that, to me, that's more of our job.
Well,
That's
look,
fair.
I think that we're always doing movies, and I would love for us to do an actual TV series. I feel like we cop out a lot. I mean, look, it's difficult to put out a whole series, a whole, 5 seasons or whatever, and obviously we maybe are not doing that in an hour and a half. But I don't know. I'd love to see a TV series. I think it gives you a lot of options for a character arc, and it also gives you a lot of options to see different monsters.
What's an actual TV series? Because we've done several series throughout the course of this season.
We've mostly done movies. What do we do as a TV series besides Breakfast Club and one
X-Men.
other one? Yeah,
We did
Terminator was an
X-Men
anthology.
that one
X-Men
was.
a series.
X-Men.
Terminator was a series. The Rock
Independence
was a movie.
Day
Independence
was a
Day was a limited series.
mini-series.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That was a limited series. Okay. What about a limited series?
Well, I think it's just a question of does the story demand it? And I think to Ed's point, the idea of trying to create like this is the iconic introductory version for a Western audience. Theoretically, we could do that in a series, but the other place my mind goes is if you really want to have your cake and eat it too with giant monster battles, I just don't know how you budget that. Aside from allowing it to look somewhat cheesy, you know what I mean? Like,
Fair enough.
What does Pacific Rim, the TV series, look like? Like logistically,
It's a cartoon.
Well, so yeah, there's something
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
Okay.
Yeah,
I can let go of it. Movie's fine.
I wouldn't let go just yet. I would say let's see what we come up with first, because that might tell us. I don't want to lock into one thing or the other right now.
I agree with that.
There's part of my brain there. I have two halves of brain. One half of brain is saying like, do you do a J.J. Abrams Star Trek thing where it's just like the lore is implied, and if you know it, that's awesome. You'll find some cool stuff, but we're basically making this for everyone that doesn't. That's one side. The other side of my brain is thinking like really meta on this for a reason I can't think of why, but my brain almost goes more to like a like, did you guys ever see Goosebumps, the movie from a few years ago with Jack Black, where Jack Black plays R.L. Stein, and it's like all these do you lean into the fact that this thing is so huge and it means nothing over here, and it's just like, what would happen if this like Japanese story of Ultraman ended up being like real, and it's like this kid discovers that his grandpa, who was the one that created Ultraman, actually was Ultraman, and all this was true, and now he finds out that this legend I don't know why my brain goes there, but those were kind of like, both of them I think are ways to skirt around the fact that there are 50 plus years of lore with this that I just don't like. We're not qualified to even try to like kind of play in, to be honest with you.
I'll tell you, the thing I really like about that is you're making the question of how do you westernize a very Japanese property part of the story, right? If this kid is a Japanese American kid who was born and raised in the US, and potentially even his parents were born and raised in the US, maybe the grandfather that you're talking about was the one who emigrated here, there's this disconnect from what your cultural roots are. And maybe that's even something that he struggles with, and sort of becoming Ultraman or reawakening Ultraman or whatever it might be literalizes that struggle to like reconnect to the actual cultural heritage that this character represents. It's an interesting twist.
Well, and one part about that, lest anybody think, oh, wow, that's a little... I think what's interesting about that is also Ultraman, the being that he's going to have to bond with or whatever, or the concept that he's going to have to bond with, if you want to go there, is also an alien on a strange land trying to assimilate, but also trying to be himself. All that jazz is inside Ultraman as well as this character.
So and are we having the kid be Ultraman eventually?
I think so. Like, I think part of it is like
that's brilliant.
I love and we've done this before. I think we did it with Universal Monsters way back last season, but there's something in me that just always enjoys like the legend is there. And in this case, there's 50 years of legend that people can go actually purchase and watch, and like that exists. But then like our movie is like, those are the stories that were told, but did you know that there actually was an Ultraman? And as it turns out, like Ultraman was in your family, and like it's almost like you're the next Ultraman, and all this shit is real. Like there's something kind of cool to that, where we also like don't have to worry about like, all right, does this fit in this continuity, and does this,
and to yes, and that the whole point of this dude embracing the Ultraman, the Ultramanity, as it were, is maybe that could be the other worlds where all this stuff happened. Obviously, other worlds they can literally have to go to and have adventures. And we could pull so many different symbols from Ultraman history. The ones that I think there's like an Ultraman Raiga, who's like 11 ultra dudes put into one guy who's a super guy. There's one of them betrays the rest of them. He's like a super Ultraman dude who betrays the rest of the Ultramen. There's all that to play with in that multiversal sort of thing of story or whatever, or like, you know what I'm saying?
When you think about it too, like Lord of the Rings, you're actually, when you hear the story of Lord of the Rings, you as the reader or watcher, whatever, you're hearing Frodo's take on what happened in Lord of the Rings. So it's like, imagine if the Ultraman movies and TV shows as they exist in our real world now were his grandfather, who is kind of a fictionalized historical character, retelling his tales of Ultraman for like an audience. You know what I mean?
Oh, and it could be an actual like a thing that instead of the Beta Capsule thing. I don't know. Maybe it's you can do what your grandpa can do, which is concentrate so hard that you go to these other worlds, you breach the dimensional thing, or you turn into Ultraman. Whatever. It's just like a thing, almost like a sacrament that you could pass down or something. Maybe that's too much.
That would it'd just be insane if you like all your life you read Superman comics and then you found out your grandpa was Superman and all that shit was actually about him, Right.
I mean, that you could activate your powers by doing X.
Right.
Can we cop a little bit of Alan Moore's Supreme here, where Supreme's I always loved this. Supreme's secret identity in that series was as a comic book artist, essentially illustrating his own adventures. And I think if the grandpa character is essentially a mangaka, a manga artist, there's an interesting double-edged sword to explore because, kind of infamously, those guys work themselves to the bone for very little money and are like held up with great cultural esteem, but don't necessarily achieve like fame and fortune for doing the work that they do. And I think if this guy was like an early manga artist in Japan who essentially created all these insane adventures and characters, maybe even, you do a little, I don't know if our corporate partners would like this, but you could do a little like Siegel and Schuster. He was stolen from the the IP was stolen from the grandpa and they made millions, and the grandpa moved to the US and was kind of penniless. I don't know, that might be a little too much, but I guess I started with just that idea of the grandpa is a manga artist. The grandpa is an artist.
I mean, that could just be in the background. I mean, it could be influencing the character's, decisions and the way he handles everything. It doesn't have to be part of the movie per se.
Well,
I think. Go ahead, Ed. You go first.
I was just gonna say. I think him being sort of an artist who all those stories and all those tales and all that money that got made off of all that stuff it wasn't worth it. And when you find out that he was actually that was the secret identity of a dude who is broken down like this from saving the universe a bunch of times. And it was definitely worth it. And the tales were worth it because the tales are what make you be able to become Ultraman, dummy, and to save the next generation. That's what it was worth. I didn't get super rich, but that's what it was worth. I
think you take all that, and I think he's dead in the first 10 minutes. And I think it's this kid going to his grandpa's funeral. It's like, what is there to celebrate? This guy was an idiot. He created this thing, got nothing for it, and then the whole movie is his discovery of like who his grandpa actually was. All these scientists, like in the TV show, the one that I watch is like a group of scientists. It's like those people actually exist out there. He goes to track down his old friends and stuff because maybe like, something happens. I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's like something happens and he realizes all that stuff is true. And, like those characters are amalgamations of these certain people, and he goes and meets them. It's like, you're this guy from that show. So it's like almost like pulling in the lore, like, it's a little Galaxy Quest-ish where it's like he's watching episodes of the show to figure out like, who is this guy? I need to figure out who this guy actually is in real life because I think he might be able to help me, Yeah,
I think that's super interesting. I mean, do we want to go so far as like he is actually watching old episodes of the Ultraman TV show?
Depends on how meta you want to get with it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. It's an interesting question. Like, do we fictionalize the history of Ultraman as a fictional character, or are we essentially setting this in a reflection of our world where Ultraman is this character that started in 1966 and has spun off into all this stuff, and he's a Japanese cultural institution? There's something interesting about making it sort of a reflection of our world because, again, you get a kid who feels like he should have great familial pride in this Japanese cultural icon, but because he's Japanese American, like he just kind of doesn't care. And so it's a little bit about, is it a little bit like the secret history of Japan? Like, if Ultraman premiered in 1966, in 1959, was there just like a week-long incident where Japan was literally invaded by aliens and they fought it off?
Or you do it like all these, you almost do it like, I don't know, Men in Black or something, where it's just like these threats were there and they fought them off. And then, the public never really knew because Ultraman always was able to stop it or to fight it. I know that kind of goes against, Ultraman because they're literally like knocking over buildings and stuff, Power Ranger style. But again, it's just like, there's something also endearing about the tall tale aspect of it too, If
I can build on the tall tale aspect of it, what if there's something like, in 1959, I'm just going to use that as a year because it kind of works out the timeline or whatever. The grandpa bonded with this alien intelligence, and for 18 months, he had these incredible powers, and it just so happened to be during this invasion, and he fought it off. But then the grandpa, lost his connection to Ultraman, and he always tried to get it back, but he could never quite get it back. And so part of telling the story and creating the character was almost this sort of sense of sorrow over what he had lost. He's trying to spiritually reconnect back. Like, I had the power to save the world and I lost it. Where did Ultraman go? Right? Like, he spent his entire life wanting to reconnect with Ultraman or whatever this entity was, but he could never quite unlock it. And so then that's sort of a double thing for the kid, because it's not only rediscovering this sort of respect and pride in your family's heritage, but it's doing the thing your grandpa never could. You know, it's unlocking that power that he forever never could quite wrap his hands around.
Well, I can see some fun dream sequences, you know, him dreaming of Ultraman. Yeah. Well, I'm not talking about him wearing a Clockwork Orange Batman outfit, Ultraman outfit, and walking in the desert sad. I'm just saying an interesting moment where he's face to face with Ultraman, and he wakes up thinking he's just dreaming about his grandpa's stuff. And he ignores it basically, and he's got to get more and more information.
I think that's what happened. Like, once his grandpa dies and he's kind of like, whatever, he starts having dreams or whatever about Ultraman, and he's like, why? It must just be because of this. But then it's like, yeah, more and more, like, something pulls him towards it. I think that's really cool.
And then on top of that, like, monsters show up at some point, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, and then he has to do it, and maybe he has a little bit of the Peter Parker syndrome, and kind of like, well, now that I've connected with it, do I want to do this at all anyways?
I mean, you could do the lame, maybe we could come up with a better way, but it's just like somehow him dying sends out this beacon or some signal that Earth is now vulnerable because Ultraman is not connected to its host any longer, you know?
Yeah, that actually sounds good.
There's something to that.
There's a better version of that somewhere.
We'll get to it.
We will get to it. So let's talk a little bit about the monsters. I don't want to completely derail us, but like, there's something chewy there with the whole Ultraman mythology. I'll just throw this out there. If we want to talk about the monsters, or if we want to talk about the Science Patrol, because maybe there is like a Japanese deep cover unit that, you know, is essentially their 3 levels deeper than the CIA, but it's real, right? Like, that is from the series, but it's also the real thing that they monitor these extraterrestrial type of threats. How do they play into it? And then tangentially, relatedly, how do the monsters themselves play into it?
Well, this is an interesting idea, because Ed had a great point earlier about the science team being from all over the world. I think it would be pretty great if you had a specific science team. Since Ultraman, they knew that these monsters might come back, and so since then they've been looking for the monsters and trying to pay attention, but they've done it globally at this point because they know that it wouldn't just be Japan this time, it could be the entire world. And it ups the ante.
For sure. I guess the question would be, does that become like a global multicultural agency, or is that just Japan? Because my feeling is it's just Japan, and that's some good roles for some Japanese actors, even if the setting of this is the U.S.
I mean, I'm down with that. I like that too.
I think a Japanese team having to come here and solve stuff or whatever because the incursions are getting more or whatever. I think them being, I could totally get behind that as long as we have a good reason why the monsters are a worldwide threat at this point. I do think that is important. They came through Japan, but it's going to get bigger than that.
Well, I mean, we can have multiple monsters landing all over the world, and Ultraman having to fight all of them and flying literally from country to country, because he does fly fast.
And he's big, so, you know, scale-wise, it's not as far.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to suggest that maybe, you know, as our kid character is sort of having his weird dreams, sort of finding some of this stuff out. Maybe, you know, the Science Patrol shows up from Japan to sort of recruit him like the team in the Matrix. But I kind of don't like that. I brought it up for discussion, but I kind of don't like it because you almost want that kid to have a full independent adventure, right? Like you kind of don't want to just shortcut it by introducing like, now here we are to expo dump everything on you.
But see, and that's why I was talking about that multiverse jazz earlier and the whole Flash Gordon of it all. Like the Ultraman stories are about the world where all the buildings got smashed and Ultraman got to get really ultra. The old dude, like we said earlier, the old dude really did that. He didn't necessarily do it here in Japan. Maybe he went through a dimensional incursion in Japan or was concentrating hella hard in Japan or something. And it was about to come through there. And he had to go through the gap to keep those things out of this Japan and whatever. But I'm just saying, like, we could get the fact that it all really happened without destroying our world or having a preposterous, ridiculous cover up that doesn't even make any sense, given the wholesale damage that Ultraman incursions and kaiju incursions are supposed to have. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes. I mean, if I can split the difference with you a little bit, you know, maybe call him Shin Hayata, the grandfather. When he became Ultraman, it wasn't like what happened in the books or in the comics or in the show, right? He didn't grow to 150 feet tall. He couldn't shoot laser beams. But maybe he did get the body and the indestructibility and the strength. And so it's much smaller scale, and maybe even the monsters were different. I feel like if you do that, but he had access to this shared mind, the Ultra Mind, which is from the series. And so to your point, Ed, he had sort of cross-dimensional awareness, right? When he became Ultraman, suddenly his mind expanded. He sort of had memories from all these different Ultramen across multiple dimensions. He couldn't access those powers. I think if we could set that up, then when his son, or his grandson rather, does access those powers in the third act and grows 150 feet tall and is shooting spacium rays and doing the whole bit, it's all that much more satisfying.
And if I could just, and that, baby. Oh, you threw the lob and the shack's coming through. It's beautiful, dude, because it shows that he has actually mastered it and graduated the form. And it shows that, like, I've always wanted Ultraman to do more as a little dude. He has only a little time to be Ultraman as a big giant person, maybe, you know, but as a smaller person, like a slick metal dude, he's literally indestructible. The like knife blows he could do. He's like a T-1000 kicking your ass on a human level, and then giant monsters. Maybe he has to take out a giant monster while he's on human level, and then later a gianter monster comes and he has to get big to fight it. Like that man as an Ultraman action angle, and with the science team and stuff, there's a lot of juicy action there. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah,
that doesn't
and
have to
also,
be just buildings.
It also gives you a chance if you have some sort of thug aliens who come that are more being sized or whatever, and he gets to we get to see some sweet martial arts action that way. And who doesn't want to see some sweet Ultraman martial arts action? I think everybody wants to see that.
Yep.
Can we start to talk villains then? Because I do think that we're sort of circling this idea of like, all right, what's he fighting? Who's he fighting? Why is he fighting?
I do have a B villain that I did want to throw out there, and maybe it can be somebody on the science team that knows about Ultraman and wants the Ultraman powers for himself. I think that would be interesting as like a complication or something like that. I don't know if it makes it too complicated. What do you guys think?
I think it's kind of a classic setup. I don't think it's too complicated necessarily. I would almost shy away from it for two reasons. Number one, it's a little tropey. You know, it's a little like Dorian from The Mask. You know, you see that character a lot. Like, I'm just a bad dude, and once I discover that this power is real, I'm just going to get it for myself so that I can be, you know, the evil version of the hero. I don't necessarily want to go down that road. And then number two, Ultraman and sort of Japanese tokusatsu Sentai superhero culture has always really been about this sense of duty to the collective. You know, and so I don't know if I would really want to undermine that. I don't know if I would want to be like, well, there's actually this double-crossing nefarious force in the Science Patrol that's trying to, exploit the power for its own ends. It just feels a little like I've always felt Ultraman to be kind of a utopian character. And so I don't know if I would want to go down that road of like, he has to deal with these crappy Earthmen.
Arguably, I'd also argue that you can't, because Ultraman kind of like sort of halfway chooses you too.
Oh, very much so.
You probably couldn't even do it if you wanted to. So that's a good point.
So I think one thing I would want to figure out, even maybe before necessarily villain, is why did the grandfather and Ultraman, why wasn't it a full connection, and why did they split? Like, and I'm wondering, because Ron, when you said that, my mind was like, I wonder if like this whole time the grandpa thought that Ultraman left him, but really he was forcibly split from him unbeknownst to him, and Ultraman has been like in captivity for 60 years,
Oh, wow.
Ooh.
Oh my God! Ultraman
boy.
got snatched. That's great. And there's
Billy
a villain
Business
for
on
your
fire
ass.
again.
Dude, there's a villain for
I'm
your
just gonna pull
ass.
George Costanza and be like, "Good night, everybody."
No, but because, you know what's interesting about that? Okay, Ultraman gets jacked, right? But the original jazz was you connect with Ultraman with your mind across anything, no matter what you can. So Homeboy was trying to write down all those. He was trying to live, like you guys were saying earlier, live and breathe that stuff and draw the mangaka, be a mangaka, drawing all the manga, so that he could try to get himself into that state. And he never could, but the kid could use that while he's digging through his dad's stuff. I mean, his grandpop stuff when he's dead. It's like trying to reconnect with his dad. I mean, with his grandpa, trying to find out why is he so drawn with this, and he can enter that mind state and do some of that stuff.
Yes to all that. And there's something, God, I kind of got the chills, Billy. Like, there's something to that idea of, this grandfather. He's this very kind, introverted man, spends his whole life, to Ed's point, like drawing these comics, creating this character just to try to reconnect to this thing that the grandfather felt like he failed Ultraman, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was not worthy enough. And then to find out that like Dream at the beginning of the Sandman comics by Neil Gaiman, like he's just been imprisoned. The Ultraman entity has been imprisoned by some other power for 60, 70 years. And the Ultraman has been dreaming of Shin Hayata the same way that Shin has been dreaming of the Ultraman. And to just realize that like they both felt like they were abandoned by each other, but they weren't. And it was some other force, like just the catharsis when Ultraman is let loose to bond with the grandson and the full power is unlocked. I mean, good Lord.
Okay,
Good
great.
Lord.
Then how do we do that? Is it the kid that goes and rescues him? Is it another outside force? Does the science team figure it out?
And that gets to the nitty gritty of trying to, or is he on the science team, and is the science part of the science team's job to find Ultraman? Now, not necessarily find Ultraman, but to like do something sciencey to get close to that, to where when Homeboy starts having these dreams is connected to, you know what I'm saying? He understands why he was going that route in the first place, or is that too Destiny-y?
No, so to go back to what Bill was saying about like giving this guy his own kind of adventure, my thought with that is like, again, I said it earlier in the episode, but it's like these dreams and everything, like I feel like if Ultraman can get even just a speck of a message out to this kid, even if it doesn't quite make sense to him, I think the first thing he's going to do is like, if all this other stuff is real, which we have to figure out why he would all of a sudden think this was real and not fake. But if he starts thinking that, he's like, okay, the only people that can help me are this science team. Now in the comics and the shows, these are fake people, but there must be real versions. So it's like we're sending him to them, not the other way around.
Completely agreed. And I think to me then structurally, what you're talking about is we need an Act 1 turn that definitively, not even definitively, but proves that at least some of the Ultraman legend is real. Like the kid needs to be attacked or encounter an alien monster or a force of an alien monster, which I think brings me back to the question of who captured Ultraman.
Which
I'm
brings me back to my question of like, why is the villain coming? And it's like, I can't think of anything better than a beacon. But if, let's just say for now, the beacon thing, half of that host is dead. Ultraman is gone. We're ready. Why would they attack just this kid unless they're like, no, we have to kill the whole host's lineage, something, you know?
I've got it. So the guy gets when the grandpa dies, they basically had to imprison Ultraman until the other host died, because while the host was alive, if they showed up, it would give Ultraman the power to break free. So he couldn't break free while he was separate, but if they went and put that guy in danger, they could. But once he dies, Ultraman's whole source goes back to where he's at, if that makes any sense. You see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying, but I actually thought, what about this? What if the only thing the grandpa leaves him is that capsule? That's it. Or whatever the real version of the capsule is. And so the bad guys aren't coming necessarily for this kid. They're coming for this capsule, although we'd have to figure out why they waited 75 years to do anything about it.
I'm gonna try to simplify this a little bit, because to me, I think we need to think of Ultraman. He's locked in a dungeon. It's the interdimensional version, metaphysical, whatever. But like, I don't want to create lore around like how can he get out versus how can't he get out. Like, he is straight up locked away by a third party. He has been captured and his power doesn't work. What I do like what you said though, Billy, is if the capsule is left by the grandfather and the kid is looking at it and he presses it and it doesn't work, right? And it's like, this is weird. This looks like Ultraman's capsule. Why did my grandfather have this? There's no way. There's no way. It's dark. It's a dark, stormy night one night. I'm going to press it and try it. And nothing happens, right? I think then you need to go back to the idea that Ultraman is sending messages, psychic messages from his dungeon, and they were reaching the grandpa, and now or they weren't reaching the grandpa, and now they're reaching the kid. And why are they reaching the kid? And because I think it's like there's the beacon thing is more about. I'm getting wrapped up in my own thoughts here, but like the beacon thing is more about who Ultraman is choosing, rather than like anybody is scared of Ultraman or Ultraman is getting the power to do anything, I think.
So what do you mean by that? So basically you mean that it's obviously Ultraman's choice. I think we can all agree on that. It's Ultraman's choice to bond with you. There's only a few places he could come through and be with, whatever. So I get that, but he's locked away. He's in another dimension.
I think
what do you have to do to get to him? We just narrowed down. What does the person have to do to tap into Homeboy's prison? What is that mechanism, and why is it happening now?
I think we have to create some mumbo gumbo here, is what I'm saying. Legitimately, this is what I'm saying. I think we need to create a villain, and we need to motivate that villain so we can then extrapolate, well, what is the villain doing to imprison Ultraman? And
so
how do you
then
beat
that brings me to, and I truly don't think any of us are qualified to answer this, but is there anything existing in the lore that we could even play with enough to be like, this is how it was in the show, but in the real world, it was actually like this. So that way it's like, it connects still with that tall tale aspect of it all, but we don't have to create something new. Like, I don't even know who's Ultraman. Like, does Ultraman have like a Joker or a Rita Repulsa? Like, does he have like one big nemesis?
Not really.
It didn't really work that way. Like, it was just alien monsters would show up, and some of them would show up over and over again, but it was a little bit more nebulous. Like, they didn't really have motivation. You know what I mean?
I mean, one of them did. Like, the second episode, the guy wanted to live there, and the guy tried to talk to him and was like, well, we can share. And the guy was like, well, we have 2 billion people. And he's like, that's the entire Earth. It would double the population. I don't think we can handle that. And then the guy was like, we know, and we're here to kill you all so we can have this planet. I mean, that's the most boring plot ever, but it is also what that plot was. I mean,
well, and they
so
also had, There is an Ultraman King. Don't at me with these names. There was an Ultraman King that could imprison you. That he could imprison other Ultra people because there was a dude named Bilal who was
Belial.
like Belial. Yeah, sorry. He was a bad Ultraman. Basically, he was one of the people who used the Ultra powers for bad or whatever. And above the Earth, supposedly, there's a layer of reality, like an other dimensional prison that the kaiju bodies go up to and can theoretically be reanimated and brought back down. I read about something like that. There's all types of stuff in Ultraman.
What's the big belt? But what is it?
So Kaiser Belial,
Belial?
which was he was originally Ultraman Belial. I think he was essentially an Ultraman that broke bad, and then he started forming his own army. I think from Ultramen across the multiverse.
But see, this is the genius of our plot. It's like it doesn't really matter what happened in the lore. What happened in real life is Belial could have been like exactly that. He was the one. Maybe they back in the day, him and Ultraman Alpha were like super homeboys, and then they got into a tiff, and then he locked him away, for undisclosed reasons or whatever. I'm just saying, like, look, you just gave me a reason why there's a character that exists that is Ultraman bad, and they have the ability to imprison. So let's just let's do a little amalgamation of all that. Why not?
I think that works. I mean, I think there's also, you could do the classic multi-dimensional villain, right? Where it's like, now that I know that the multiverse exists, I have to dominate all versions of myself, sort of a thing. I don't know what the exact motivation is, but there's that classic villain trope of like, I have to be the king of the alternate versions of me. I have to be King Ultraman, to Ed's point.
Well, they did that in the one.
Right.
Your favorite movie?
I love that movie. I really do. Some really great fight scenes in that.
I mean, the thing that they did in the Ultraman mythos is the what is it? The Belial Empire. Hold on, the Belial Galactic Empire, right, was formed by this Kaiser Belial.
Okay, I'm going to throw out a bad idea. Maybe it'll spur a better one. Okay. What if, just because I can't think of anything better, a little bit of the chosen one trope? There's something about this family line that completely, when an Ultraman hosts one of them, or they host the Ultraman, it unlocks all the powers, right? Ultraman, the one, I'm going to call him Alpha, if there's two. Alpha connects with the grandpa, and they start to unlock, and we see the powers. And Belial is jealous because that's the only person. So he locks this Ultraman away, but he can't connect to this host because it just doesn't work like that. Something to that. But I spurred something. So
dude, I had what I think might be a mind bullet. Okay. Belial is the Ultraman of our dimension. And the problem with being from our dimension is that you can't access Ultraman powers in our dimension. And so Belial, 50, 60 years ago, the alien Belial from, there's a name for their planet, it might be Ultra Zero or something, in our dimension, in our real world, accessed the multiverse in 1950 whatever. And he started trying to form his galactic empire. I mean, it could even be like the Ultraman Belial from our dimension accessed the multiverse at any point in the past. Could have been 65 million years ago when he killed the dinosaurs, right? The whole point is, in our dimension, for whatever cosmic reason, Ultraman powers do not work correctly. And so because he is the weakest Ultraman, he then takes it upon himself to go across the multiverse, killing Ultramen and stealing their power. But he knows that the one thing he could never do is return to his actual home because he would lose it all. And so if Ultraman Alpha, whatever the Ultraman is that we're talking about that was bonded with the grandfather, is the only one that can manifest power in our dimension, that makes him very, very valuable. And then when you capture him, you realize that you still cannot connect to a host in our dimension. So even though you have the chosen one Ultraman locked in your cosmic dungeon, you can't get the thing out of him that you really want, which is access to power here in our world. I'm going a little off the rails, but does all that track? Are you following all that? I just making our world special because this is the world where you cannot have power. And then what happens when you figure out how to have power? This movie happens.
I followed it all. It's complicated, but I followed it, and it does make sense.
Okay, all right.
And
I'm
I
not
d-
saying
and
it's
I-
the greatest thing, but I
No,
like
no,
the
no. I
idea.
like the idea of like, if we're explaining like, well, then why is it a TV show? It's like, because we're telling stories that can happen everywhere else but here, and we don't know why. It's the same reason why there's no magic here in real life, you know? It's just why we make movies in this dimension, you know?
It's the closest thing we could do.
And also, I don't want to complicate it, but I think it simplifies it. If our character can somehow commune with imprisoned Ultraman and get the Ultraman powers and go do Ultra stuff other places, maybe that's what the original one did. Maybe that's what this one can do. But when Bilal says, now you have the power, now you're fully connected, you're a full host and everything. If they have a fight here and he kills Ultraman, he would be able to use all the Ultra powers here and conquer this one last funky fresh dimension, having broken that seal you were talking about. What if you could figure out a way to break the seal by getting somebody to bond with it and then destroying it?
Exactly. I think it's Bilal that's actually sending him whatever signals that he needs to breadcrumb him back to imprisoned Ultraman, because he's like, I can't really do much, but if I get them together and then take Ultraman's powers, maybe that's what I'm missing, you know?
Mm-hmm. And just all that jazz about him. There's going to be some fun and games. We're going to figure out a fun and games period for our Ultraman to do some stuff, so that by the end, when Bill's talking about him becoming big in our world, a big giant 150-foot dude fighting a big giant final kaiju, smashing down buildings for real. It's real serious. Oh man, it will feel so earned, right? Because we did all this other stuff.
100%. Oh, guys, we're getting a call.
I think he's gonna like this though.
I think he's gonna love this. I hope. Let's check. Hey guys, it's George. How are you? How you doing?
Great.
Really good. Really good. Well, listen, I'm glad to hear that things are going so well. I just want to make sure, if we're going to make this movie, it has to be relevant to our times. It has to really speak to issues and concerns that are real for people. And so one of the things that really bothers me is this rise in cancel culture. This idea that people can just be completely destroyed by things that they say that they maybe don't even mean. And I'm not talking about like racist stuff or sexist stuff. I'm very, very against all that. But it's a thin line. There's a lot of different points of view. So I'd really like to use Ultraman as a way to explore the downside of cancel culture and how cancel culture is maybe poisoning the way we make art. I think that's very important. So, just find a way to just insert that nugget into your storyline, and old George will be a happy camper. Okay, thanks, guys. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Well, that's
Oh
horrible.
my god.
He is a boomer.
Jeez, Lewis. It's
Sometimes I have so much fun pitching things that I forget that we work for people that I don't want to.
Okay, well, let's be real. Most cancel culture is good because it's not even cancel culture half the time. Usually it's consequences culture. Could we make something that is real, where it's like someone hasn't done something and they get fired from it or lose something for it?
Maybe. Okay, wait. How about this? And this is like
where
a
it's
real
real?
loose interpretation, but it's like, what if that's part of Belial's plan to trap Ultraman? Is essentially like, look, at the end of the day, if you're going to call it cancel culture, they're basically saying, oh, you're framed. So it's like, let's frame Ultraman essentially, so that like part of that somehow gets him closer to being imprisoned. Is like it's him being demonized and villainized, because you would think Ultraman's so powerful, how do you just throw him in a cage and lock him up? It's like you'd almost have to like, I don't know, if there's like a council of Ultramen, he's punished for something, you know?
But see, that's the thing. Belial got canceled. Belial got canceled, dude. Belial got canceled. He was one of the, because he's Lucifer.
I get it, but George is saying cancel culture. He thinks it's bad. So for like, we can't postulate that Belial is actually sympathetic because he was canceled.
Well,
Okay. Hold on. That's a good point, Billy, because I do think the idea is like people get unfairly maligned by the culture, and that's so. What if that is the grandfather's backstory? And like, not that the grandfather harassed anybody, but what if just the idea that like he was so caught up in these stories that people, I mean, here's something that might resonate with George. He was so committed to his version of these stories to the point of like rejecting other interpretations that his fan base turned on him. And so that was why he sort of was left in obscurity in old age, was because he had this very strict and stringent idea in his own head of like, this is what Ultraman is, this is how it works, this is what the stories are. And he sort of kept bucking against, attempts to update it.
That works for me. Like, imagine like a very bossy, stringent Stan Lee. If Stan Lee was just like, nope, Peter Parker is this. He will never be anything other than this. I know, I was there.
Well, I personally think it's more like somebody like Alan Moore, who like, because of his stances on what the machine does with his stuff, he's canceled in regards to don't work with that guy, because all he'll do is badmouth whatever other money you try to make off of it if you don't just kowtow to his artistic vision the whole time. He's a control freak. He's a blah, blah,
And what people don't realize is like, I'm trying to, the grandfather has an ulterior motive, which is to connect this thing. He's like, he doesn't care about if the movie disrespects his vision. It's like, no, these are just SOSs to try to get the thing back. Like, I can't have you come in and tell this story or write this message, because I'm really actually trying to contact an alien with this.
Right. I'm telling his history.
Right.
Yeah, it would be like having some kid come in and interrupt your communique back to base in the middle of a war. You know what I'm saying? Just like, 100%. Let me do some of the dots and dashes. I'll have fun with it. No, that's not what that is. Yeah.
So then maybe he's like canceled in a sense. Like, maybe that's another reason why it's taken 70 years, is like this was somehow taken away from him and became part of like, again, something George will love. It became this bought out, unbeknownst to him somehow, like he got screwed, and essentially like he didn't own the rights anymore. And a bunch of Ultraman stuff came out that did nothing to do with him, and that's why.
And that's part of why he can't connect, because that's the version that's out in the ether and it's messing up the signal.
Oh my God. So before he dies in Act 1, like he has to give a speech to the kid that the kid doesn't understand the significance of, but it's sort of like, you don't know the power of stories. Stories set the priorities for our world. Stories, unite our thinking. Stories are capable. It's all the stuff that we as artists love about stories. Mm-hmm. He's putting it into words, but for him, it's real. And so then I think that makes me think part of Ultraman being able to access this dimension, part of being able to connect to the Ultraman power, is some sort of idea of like a Jungian collective unconscious, which is like a very kind of Alan Moore, Grant Morrison type of weird sci-fi thing, where it's like, enough people. It's almost the sci-fi version of Tinkerbell, right? Like clap your hands, show her you believe, so she gets power. It's almost like we need to, like the culture needs to believe in the power of Ultraman or believe in the ideals of Ultraman in order to open the doorway to Ultraman, something like that.
Oh, but that's the thing. Number one, that's why it's so messed up that his kid doesn't dig the Ultraman crap, that his grandson doesn't dig the Ultraman crap, because maybe his son didn't dig it either. And his grandson is the last gasp. I'm about to die, or I'm basically dead. And he's the last gasp of trying to find anything to connect with this stuff. Number one. Number two, if I could put the stewardship of the brand, as it were, the communique in his hands and he does it correctly, that's a last gasp hope. You know what I'm saying? I love all that.
It's so funny that George Lucas is doing this, because this becomes such a weird meta commentary about like Star Wars going to a big conglomeration. Yeah,
that's why I think he'll like this.
And last things last, when he gets the whole Ultraman power, the whole reason you said the collective unconsciousness, much like Star Wars, I think. But since Bilal has been conquering dimensions and has so many different powers across so many different dimensions, he has all this ultra jazz he's doing that our Ultraman might not be able to do at first. But because at the end, he truly believes, he gets truly into it, that's what allows him to grow big and fight. And the graduated level of being able to grow big is to collect the powers of the other Ultramen through time into you to match all the Ultramen that died messing with Belial. So that it's a real clash of the Titans in the Ultra realm at the end.
Which is ironically what they tried to do at the end of Rise of Skywalker, which is I am all the Jedi, you know?
Yeah. So is the kid also an artist?
Okay, let me jump on this. Wait, I had this thought before when Ed was talking. I think you do this like Field of Dreams. The kid is the Kevin Costner. He needs to go find like a punk rock artist who's essentially the James Earl Jones character to buy into his mission and go on the adventure with him. And it's a little bit like somewhere in the middle of the second act, you're trying to convince this person who then becomes, you know, your second lead to undertake this mission with you. I mean, I almost wonder if there's like, do they have to create a work of art in order to unlock the Ultraman power, right? So it's almost a little bit about like artistic collaboration. I don't know exactly what that means, but like he needs an artist. Okay, this is getting really weird, but the Ultra powers were accessed by like beams of light. I think Ultraman might even be called the Lord of Light, or he's empowered by the Lords of Light.
He's from the lands of light.
The land of light. So maybe the Beta Capsule, it emits some sort of metaphysical light, but you need an artist who can draw the correct whatever with the living light, right? And like that is how you open the doorway to Ultraman.
Yeah, it's almost like a combination of the Indiana Jones staff of Ra and a sling ring from Doctor Strange. Like maybe that's how he accesses the prison finally to unlock the dungeon. Like maybe it has to be drawn or something, you know?
I mean, maybe his grandfather in his later years was just obsessed with drawing these variations of these weird designs that like it just almost looked like, you know, Jack Torrance in The Shining. Like he just was covering pages and pages with variations on this weird alien looking design, and they thought that he had gone nuts, but it was really like, I'm trying to free Ultraman. And so it's like the grandson goes, finds some reclusive world-class artist that might have a connection to Ultraman, maybe not. She, or vice versa, you know, maybe it's a granddaughter and it's a man, or it's the grandson and it's a woman who's the artist. She has to use the Beta Capsule to draw or whatever, you know, in some specific way, and that's how you unlock Ultraman. And I think you get to like the midpoint of the movie and they finally do that, right? They use the Beta Capsule, they've decoded like we need to draw the portal or whatever, and that's when Belial comes through. And it's like that's when it's revealed all these these dreams, these notions, these feelings that you've been having are actually Belial trying to connect to your power as Shin Hayata's blood to manifest in this world.
Yeah, maybe we just make it so like Belial because he has no power in this realm, can't enter it unless someone opens the door from this side. So that's why he's been trying to get in this kid's head. It's a little tropey, but all this is a little tropey in some respects. But I like that it's like he's been using this kid to free him, essentially. It's a little bit like Lost in a way of how the Man in Black got out at the end. He's like, he just had to wait for someone to die so he could take their body, you know?
I mean, I have an idea for the kids. I think they should be like best friends who've been drawing together and friends together for a long time. Okay, Ash. Ash wants to be in the video. But I think it would be great if they were two like best friends. And so their cooperation is one of the things that needed to happen in order for it to work on top of that.
But I feel like it works stronger if it's part of the quest, because we want him to go on an adventure. If it's just someone that he's known and is there the whole time, like it's just something that they did that day together, you know?
Well, I was thinking literally like I'm picturing a girl best friend, and she has already believed in this the entire time, and he has not, and they were sort of at odds about that. I don't know. It's just an idea, but
when I referenced Field of Dreams, it was because I think you rip off the exact dynamic where your main character has to spend some time coming around to, oh my God, this is real. And then when they realize what they have to do, the big task is I have to go to this person and convince them that this is also real. And that person that I'm going to has a whole other level of sort of trauma and bitterness that's going to be even harder to get through than mine. But that is my task. And so the same way that Kevin Costner has to go and sort of turn James Earl Jones to his cause, and you get that chills moment where they're in the street and the headlights come up to him, and he's just illuminated by the headlights, and he's like, I heard it, and they have that conversation where it's like, oh my God, you get it now. Like, I don't know. To me, that has all the place in this movie.
But dude, my problem with that is I think how old is this kid then? Because I just can't see some 12-year-old or a 13-year-old or a 14-year-old just going up to some grown, fantastic artist and trying to find this person, then having to break them down. And it also makes it for a weird relationship. So
I always thought it was like 18-year-old or 19-year-old, kind of like,
I guess
right on the
that
cusp
changes
of
it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't see it as that young.
I was picturing as a younger kid. So yeah. Okay.
No, I was definitely thinking like early college age. You're not yet an adult, but don't have the limitations of being a kid.
And number one, that makes your grandfather older, so that it can help us with that angle of him having the Billy with the velvet hammer killing everybody's dad the first 5 minutes. So,
did it not work out every time I've suggested it? Hey, I'm sorry. Splinter had to go. Splinter had to go.
Anyway,
death is an important part of life, and you have to acknowledge it, and it does help you move forward into things.
Yeah. I mean, you guys like to watch pearls roll into the gutters. I get it. So, here's the situation. The person is 20 something. Frankly, he might be in graduate school, but so his grandpa's dead. Maybe he drew back in the days. Maybe he was going to follow in his grandfather's steps, but he didn't work out. He became a fighter instead, or a physicist, whatever. The bottom line is, in this whole adventure, he has to, number one, reconnect with the material. He's got a precious stash of original art and original concept drawings and original everything, stories, handwritten notes, whiteout all over the pages, original stuff. So when he starts to believe that he needs this person, he can persuade them with, I'll let you have access to the real stuff, the real original stuff. And the whole reason why he's seeking this super mangaka out, this lady mangaka, is that she has been a vocal proponent of the real stuff. The only Ultraman that's real is the stuff that this guy did from this period to this period. That's the only real Ultraman.
I have an idea. Yes-anding. What if we said this earlier in the episode, but what if he's just so not interested in this stuff that he sells it on eBay?
Oh.
And the one piece he needs, she bought, because all she cares about is the old original stuff. So that gives him a reason to seek her out, is because he realizes he needs that piece back.
Hey,
I love that. And it's like he's decoding sort of these visual clues that are hidden in the margins, scratched on the backs of the paper, right? Like, you know, the front of the Bristol board has the comic book page on it, but on the back there's all these variations on the weird designs, and it's like he realizes it's that one page from that one issue or what have you. I think that's fantastic, because I also like that dynamic where like she can be bought into Ultraman and the significance of Ultraman, but still not believe like, oh no, this is all some sort of cosmic spell that my grandfather was weaving to try to save the real Ultraman. Like, that sounds crazy.
Also,
I
could just say anecdotally, I bought something off Craigslist, and a year later, the guy hit me up to get it back, and that was a comedic experience, to say the least. So there's definitely it's just like I can see that scene in my head of like him showing up at her door like, hey, remember that thing that I sold you? I kind of need it back. Literally, the guy did that. The guitar that you see in the background, that guy sold me this guitar, and then he's like, hey, my girl and I got back together. I need that guitar back. And I was like, I can't help you. And so I think that scene is just such a fun scene to do.
Guys, I am absolutely loving this. I gotta say, like, you play the whole first half of the movie almost as if there is no villain. Like, it's just this weird sort of mystical coming of age story with this sort of unbelievable idea that like you can connect to the real Ultraman if you do, you know, this thing. And then I think it just skyrockets into a whole other level of cosmic weirdness when they do it at like minute 50 or an hour into the movie. They do it, it opens the doorway, and that's when Belial first appears, right? And sort of you're thrown headlong into, oh no, this is all completely real. There is a multiversal war going on led by this Ultraman. And then, you know, you get more of a traditional buddy adventure where once, you know, the gates have been broken to threaten the Earth, now we have to go essentially Dante style, like through the depths of hell to find Ultraman and bond with Ultraman and reconcile all my feelings about my grandfather. So for Act 3, it is just the greatest, most cathartic throwdown you could ever imagine.
Belial is the king of all these dimensions. Just imagine all of the monsters he's going to throw everything, you know?
Oh, and it's, I mean,
what if
God, it's, go ahead.
What if the artist lady ends up an Ultra Woman and they team up to win the fight? I don't know. There's just something about it that, I don't know, it just would be interesting to me. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but there's just something wrong with this all for me so far. I don't know what it is.
What?
I know it sounds weird, but when you said he's an adult, it makes it, I just like, now I don't think it's sellable to kids anymore. I don't know. There's just, I'm still having fun with it. I still think it's a great story.
Really? Because it's like, did you not like Batman because he was 27?
I mean,
the Power Rangers, which I grew up with, they were all 16 through 18 in the show. They were like probably 35 in real life. But I mean, like, I think having it be a kid, that's when you start to get some like really ridiculous shit. Like, I'll go back to Power Rangers. They made an 8-year-old one of the Power Rangers, and he magically grew like 4 feet when he morphed, and it was stupid, and everyone hated it. Like,
all right, that's cool.
No, but I want to figure out, like, is it just the age that you're harping on, or like, because honestly, up until you said that, in my mind was like, I don't want to jinx this, but this might be the best episode we've ever done in the show. Period. So the fact that you don't like
I'm not worried. I mean, I still think it's great. I still think it's a great story, and I do love the whole adventure. I just feel like, I don't know. It doesn't feel like there's I don't know. There's not. It's just like 4 characters. I guess that's what it is. I just feel like there's only 4 characters the entire movie. Do you know what I'm saying?
I mean, but some of I feel like that's a strength, not a weakness. I think some of the best movies of all time. I mean, you know, you think of a movie. Look, and I'm not saying it's the same type of movie by any stretch of the imagination, but like one of the great things about a movie like There Will Be Blood is it's literally about 3 people. You know, you look at the original Superman. Like, there were literally 4 actual characters, and even that might be stretching it in Richard Donner's Superman. I just don't think that's. Yeah, go ahead.
I think I kind of figured out what it is. I just need to make sure that we see some Ultraman action before the first 50 minutes. I think that's important. So maybe that can be done in a specific way, like through the memories of the dad, or I don't know, something like that.
I mean, I think that's where those dreams would come into play, right?
But that as well as, though, I do agree that somewhere on the quest, he doesn't just be a punk ass until he gets 1 billion powers. That's not cool. That's not dangerous. You know what I'm saying? Like through his trying to retrace the steps or go contact that chick, or maybe the first thing that happens once he gets this treasure trove of Ultraman art and he pores over it and stuff, and he decides he might want to sell it, is some dudes come by and kick the hell out of him and take a bunch of it, and he's like, and then he has maybe one last piece, and he's like, I'm selling this, and get rid of all this crap. And that was just some kind of danger or something.
But I mean, like, I see this whole
he's
thing.
Got 1 billion powers.
This thing is like an Indiana Jones adventure, and then it turns into a superhero. Like he's literally going
Indiana
on a quest
Jones
for
is in
artifacts.
danger.
You know?
Indiana Jones is in danger before the 3rd act.
Right, just because
Indiana Jones.
We haven't discussed like set pieces or different obstacles on the way to these things. It doesn't mean like we can't come up with some stuff. Like right now, we're just trying to nail like the actual story. You know?
Okay.
I've got 2 things to say to all that, because I think that's all valuable discussion. I would say, number 1, I think this female mangaka, she is a martial artist, and she is probably even culturally Japanese. Like, we're talking about our main character being Japanese American, and part of the big theme of this movie is him sort of rediscovering Japanese culture. So I think, number 1, if she lives in Japan, he seeks her out in Japan. She is also a martial artist. In addition to being an artist, she could fight some people. But then I think also I think there's a lot of emotional heavy lifting that's done in the first hour of him. You know, you almost want, not in a dry way, but it's like part of his quest has to be reflecting upon things like Hiroshima, the scars of World War II, why was Japan so obsessed with giant monsters in the 50s? Like all the stuff that actually, everything that added up to Ultraman. Like, where do those Japanese senses of like honor and duty come from? Where does Ultraman's code of justice come from? Like, all of this stuff is very uniquely Japanese. And I think if our main character has to sort of understand that stuff in a very active way through set pieces in the first 2 acts of the movie, it's really hammering your theme home, and it's giving you more than just, oh, I'm a guy who has to go talk to some people about these Ultraman drawings. Because it's not that. It shouldn't be that.
Okay, cool.
Does that track?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm totally on board. It's fun. I just think that, I don't know, as long as it's done in an active way, I would enjoy this. But there's a part of me that's like, so we're going to see a very, very long, not a lot of stuff happening at the beginning movie, like 45 minutes, 50 minutes before any Ultraman action actually happens, before you get Ultraman in a movie named Ultraman. That was my problem. But since we've kind of solved that, I think I can roll with that.
I think it's a valid question, though, if that formula still works, because that was very much the formula of the Richard Donner Superman, very much the formula of Batman Begins. You know, that idea of I'm going to see a superhero movie, but I got to wait an hour or more for the superhero. Like, for a long time, that was very valid. Are we saying that's no longer valid?
But Batman was getting in fist fights over gruel 5 minutes in, it seemed like, and then they figured out why he was there. You know what I'm saying? So if we use an Ultraman dream for that section, like, this is how big it was, this is how awesome the Ultraman stuff really is, but it's an old man's dream. And he's like, yeah. And we know later that he was almost there. He was almost connected with him. They were almost at like a spiritual commune or something, but he messed it up. And he's so sick and so sickly and dead. And that was, you know what I'm saying? That was maybe one of his last shots, or his last shot to do that. and all this jazz happens. And then I just agree at some point with the mangaka and the adventure with her, he's got to get into some fisticuffs and maybe take some blows, get beat up. He's not the best, but he has to get into some rough and tumble stuff.
I mean, I also just I think too, like he resents. I think it's more just like he's not interested in Ultraman. Maybe he resents it flat out. Like he got teased as a kid, so like we can have him, like you said, be bullied. And there's kind of like there's different ways to do it. I think. I just think plus, like you're going to watch Ultraman, the movie, there's going to be iconography of Ultraman throughout the first hour anyway. It's just by the nature of it. So it's just like, while we're not sitting here beating out actual set pieces bit by bit, like it's there, but I think ultimately the most important thing is like, does the story make sense? I do think you can get away with an hour of not seeing the real true Ultraman if that first hour is just a cool ass adventure movie on its own, and then it turns into a superhero movie.
I think tonally, I was just going to say, I think tonally, the whole first hour needs to be about teasing Ultraman. You know what I mean? Like the whole thing is a little bit of a cock tease in that it's like, there are these multiple dimensions where Ultramen fight across the cosmos, and like ultimate cosmic power is warred over by this horrible Belial who's like the corrupted Ultraman who wants to conquer the multiverse. And like all of this stuff is very upfront, but it's upfront in the way of like, no, that can't be real.
What if we did this, by the way? I'm not really I'm not a proponent of pitching specific scenes, but what if the movie opens on a big Ultraman battle, and it's like, we're just seeing, like, we get it, like kind of like we did with our Power Rangers one, where we start on a big battle, and as there's blows being struck and whatever, it kind of cuts and you see the grandpa and he's writing the story or draw whatever it is, but it's
Look,
like
you just sold me.
There you go.
Personally, you just sold me. That there was just that little thing.
But that's
missing.
also I get it. That's also a great way to tell the audience, like right off the bat, like, oh, in this world, Ultraman is just a story that this old dude is writing, like not what you thought it was,
And then you turn it on its head. No, it actually is real. So that's perfect.
Right.
That's great.
This is the most Grant Morrison reboot we've ever done, and I love everything about it.
This is Flex Metallo. This is Ultraman Metallo.
And listen, all I'm here for is I want the scene. It's literally the Dark Night of the Soul scene, the Act 2 turn into 3, where it's the grandson and Ultraman face to face for the first time in darkness, and maybe he sees his grandfather's face, like behind the helmet, or you know what I mean? Like merging with Ultraman has to be the most affecting sort of like reconciliation with the father, or in this case, grandfather story beat you've ever seen in a movie like this, because it's literally like, I now understand you. I understand what your life was about. I understand what you were devoted to and what motivated you. When we started this movie, I didn't in any way. And in this moment, I do. And now there's fusion. And now get ready for 30 minutes of the most insane Ultraman action you've ever seen after that emotional moment. That's all I'm here for.
Yeah, no, and we're talking about insane Ultraman action as in all the Ultraman anybody could ever want. Because again, like we've established, the end battle is not just this final version of Ultraman versus Belial. Belial himself has Ultraman, that Ultraman powers in him garnered over a bunch of multidimensional fights. Homeboy's bringing in all the history of his grandpa and the other Ultraman before him, and it could be a clash across dimensions. It could be a clash of him keeping hella kaijus out of our dimension. Like if there's a dimensional door that they're all rushing towards, and he's grabbing them and slamming them and karate chopping them in half and destroying all types of stuff.
Maybe you're pitching the third act of the third movie, and this first one, Belial throws some kaiju at him, and they're defeated, but Belial gets away, so that way we have a reason to do now with a fully graduated, a real Ultraman now in the world. There's something to go after.
I guess my only counterpoint to that would be if Ron was saying this too. If you spend the whole movie kind of teasing it, don't hold back, baby. Like I'm thinking, I'm saying like you can fight 15 monsters, but all I'm saying is let Belial get away at the end. Don't freaking Jack Nicholson Joker him, and it's where do we go from here? All I'm really saying is like I want our Act 3 to be the Aquaman Act 3.
No, I 100%. I think you make that first scene in the movie feel like, wow, I can't believe they're giving us the third act in the first few minutes of this. What are you doing? So that way, like we have to top ourselves at the end,
Yeah.
And like I said, and I don't think, again, we're not beating out all the different sequences and stuff, but I think there's just some point before he can get giant, before he even gets all the way ultra, that he gets close enough to getting some of the ultra powers. But we can see the promise of the premise, like a guy with a little ultra power can do X. Look, and then later we give him the whole, Field of Dreams, hitting home runs all over the place.
I mean, he could even spend most of the movie with a sliver of the ultra power, right?
And that's what I'm saying. Just something like that to address both Ron and my concerns in regards to pacing, in regards to like just a hint of like the glow is real from The Last Dragon for cinephiles of Barry Gordy's Last Dragon. Just that little hint that the glow is real, that little hint that the force is real, those little breadcrumbs that'll keep the adventure to it. I think this might be one of the best episodes we've ever done. Honestly, this is hardcore.
Let's move on to casting then. Let's talk a little bit about, we need a Japanese American lead, a man in his 20s, we're saying. We need a Japanese female lead. We need the grandfather, Japanese man. We need Belial, which could be a fun bit of casting. And anybody else that we might want to throw in there. But I mean, I think that's what we're talking about right now. Maybe there's even sort of maybe there is a best friend character, to Ron's point, that is sort of tagging along, just providing the contra, it's the counterpoints to everything. Like classic storytelling trope, if you're the main character and you're going to find a true believer, you need a cynic to sort of round out the triumvirate. So maybe there's a best friend who just doesn't buy any of this until he sees it with his own two eyes or her own two eyes, who could be there to be like, why are we doing this? What are you talking about? This is crazy. What's going on? You know what I mean? It's just a classic sort of supporting character role.
Cool. Well, I've got James Saito. He played the Shredder back in the day on TMNT, but he's now played a bunch of other fantastic roles, and I think he'd be a great grandpa.
James Saito.
Oh, I'm looking at him now. Yeah, it's very close to the actual creator.
Oh, okay.
I could definitely see them side by side.
Yeah, I think I was going to ask too, just because we should at least state some ground rules here. Are we going to limit ourselves to only ethnically Japanese actors, or is it sort of any Southeast Asian actor?
So I feel like we're like it has to be authentically Japanese. Like you can't just throw in like a Korean actor because it's like, oh, it's like I think we're just kind of past that point.
Well, look, I mean, are we doing this live? We're talking about it. I watched John Oliver did a thing talk about Asian Americans and how they're kind of treated as a model minority and all of this other stuff, this kind of like racism that's supposed to be positive type of stuff, and how each different ethnicity from different countries all have different backgrounds and different lifestyles, and they're all just like us. We're all regular people. Yeah. So I think it's important to have them be specifically Japanese, especially if we're going to have it literally from Japan. So I spent a bunch of time looking up Japanese actors.
I mean, you're one for one in my book. So
well, I'm a good villain too. He played. He was a villain in Karate Kid Part 2. His name is Yui Akamoto. He's also on Cobra Kai right now. I'm probably saying his name incorrectly, but it's OKU Moto Akumoto is his last name,
I'm
and
trying to look
he
it up.
plays a villain in a lot of stuff, and he just is great at it. He kills it. So
Hold
Is
on.
there is there a broom for?
Mark Dacascos, yes.
He's not Japanese.
I don't know what he would play, but man, you'd want him to be something.
I also think there's room for Belial to be a non-Japanese actor. I mean,
That's
whether
true.
they're Asian, Belial could kind of be any ethnicity. We might not even see Belial's face.
I was just about to say, is Belial like constantly covered in a mask?
Ultraman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the same sort of aesthetic as Ultraman. I mean, there might be room to play with it too, because it was sort of the limitations of the day. They obviously couldn't animate Ultraman's face, and so it was never really meant to be a helmet. But the aesthetic of the helmet has sort of continued with the character. But it was always supposed to just be an alien with metallic skin.
Yeah.
So maybe, we're almost doing a Pandora, James Cameron's Avatar thing where the Ultramen, are CG characters and do have a little bit more life to their expressions. I don't know.
I mean, it's probably smart. We'll be able to do a lot of cool action with it that way. But then
Very
just
much
have
so.
just have a great stuntman doing the movement. This one may be pushing it a little bit. But his name is Boo Boo Stewart.
From Twilight.
He was from Twilight, and he's part Native American, part Japanese, part Chinese. It's actually an interesting mix of Asian cultures. So he could play the kid.
He's a good-looking guy. He was also in one of the X-Men movies for a hot second. He's just he's fine. I just don't know if I would trust him to carry a whole movie. But he's got a great look. He's got a fantastic look.
Yeah,
he's just not.
But he also has to kill this because we need somebody who can really act.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the thing. It should not be understated that we are at. This is as much a drama as it is an action movie, just in the way that we've described it. So I think it's something we need to keep top of mind.
Yeah, absolutely. It was also crazy. Did you know that Dean Cain is part Japanese?
I did know that.
I did know that. Yeah.
I am not suggesting him, by the way. Just to be clear.
Talking about canceled.
Yeah. I canceled him a long time ago.
There's a girl named Lyrica Okano who is on Runaways, which is a Marvel show. She actually could play kind of our punk rock artist character. I don't know what her martial arts skills are like, or what her Japanese is like. She's Japanese American, but could be an interesting choice.
Let's see.
I don't know. There's this. I don't know. I forgot what she was in, but like Suzu Heroes, I think is her name. It's like it's SUZUHIROSE. She's got a quality that I think I could buy her drawing and being a punk and being a ne'er-do-well, like kind of a Yukio style from the old Wolverine Chris Claremont, Frank Miller run type of person that's just like mischievous and skilled.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that character needs an edge. That character needs the same sort of like sharpness, frankly, that the James Earl Jones character had in League of Their Own. I'm sorry to keep referencing that movie, but I think just tonally, the dynamic of that relationship makes sense to me.
Oh, you built it. We came, baby. Oh.
There's a lady who's a stunt woman, but was also an actress. It's Kiralee Hayashi. She was in the Twilight Saga as well, Breaking Dawn Part 2, Age of Extinction, and the Book of Eli. And she's pretty young and also knows martial arts. So she might match pretty well. She doesn't look very aesthetically punk, but like if you get good makeup artists and good, clothing, I'm sure we can make that work if she can also nail the acting.
Fair enough. I feel like we could all just keep Googling for a little while, but
I mean, that's
don't know if we're gonna
literally
get much more.
everything. It's like Korea,
Yep.
Korea, China.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't think we need to cut this part of the conversation out. I think this is just the reality. So, maybe we just, at this point, I think we've given some good suggestions, but I think we need to do actual casting calls and find some people who fit the bill, especially for our two main characters. The younger guy and the female artist.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I think people would kind of like for us to cast the guy though. Who did we say that our main character was going to be? Like the person who's playing, not Shin, I guess. Shin is the grandpa, so the younger the grandson.
That's the one that
like
we can't seem to.
We can't seem to come up with any. I also think he should have an anglicized name, so his name should be like.
But what about the Henry Golden guy? I mean, he's might
But
be a swear.
he's not Japanese.
He's not.
No,
He's Chinese.
Taiwanese,
Yeah.
I believe.
JFC, man, this is what I was just talking about. Is that all these people that you're just like, what about this guy? What about this guy? It's like, again, it just plays more into the, what Ron was talking about, where it's just like we haven't given like Japanese American actors any sort of like respect and big roles. The fact that we're just like, what about this guy? It's like, no, we don't know anything about him.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why we should put a pin in this conversation. Is like we don't have a broad enough pool of talent or knowledge to come up with good choices. So we could admit that that's not a loss.
Yeah.
So let's move the conversation into directing, which might also be an interesting conversation because I do think there's an argument to be made that this should probably be directed by a Japanese American. But I don't know if that is as necessary. Certainly need someone in the writer's room who could bring some authenticity to these experiences. But I don't know, who are we thinking for director for this?
I mean, I'm gonna butcher it. I'm gonna butcher the name, and you're gonna have to fix it for me. Cary Joji Fukunaga, the guy who's doing the new James Bond movie.
Oh, dude, yeah, absolutely,
Yeah, he's great.
Like, obviously, they trust him enough with James Bond. I think you can do action if you get the call for James Bond. But he also did Beast of No Nation, which Bill, you've talked about on this show. Like that was a movie that it blew me away when I saw it. Not what I thought it was going to be.
He also directed a bunch of True Detective, and honestly, the tone of True Detective, I think, could fit the first. I mean, I think it needs to be a little more upbeat. It needs to be a little bit less dour, but the sort of magical realism, the sort of sense of anticipation and dread that hangs over everything in True Detective, I think that's super applicable to everything we've been talking about here.
Yeah,
super down. We already got it. We're good.
No other takers. No, we're not going to try anything else.
Cary Joji Fukunaga is great. He's great. He nailed everything.
He's great, and I think though, like somebody like just a firm hand, older director. I think Takashi Miike, like somebody like that who can do like the horror of being in a cosmic space and time and all the like the multiverse jazz. Because I think some of those dreams should be disturbing. I'm just throwing him out there as like somebody he did The Audition. He did a lot of crazy movies, but he's also done like 13 Assassins, things that have a lot of action. He's like 60 years old. And he has he understands, like, it isn't an intellectual thing to him how Japan has suffered and persevered for the last, bunch of years. It's not an intellectual thing to him. He lived it. And he directed movies all the way through it. So I just think he's up there as far as somebody who I've seen in movies do a fantastical look, an action-y thing, disturbing thing, Cronenbergian type of stuff.
Definitely Cronenberg. Awesome. I mean he's an unbelievable director, but yeah, his stuff is rather dark. That would be my only hesitation there.
But yeah, I think Cary knows how to do in American style too, in regards to like our stupid shooting days, are the way that we decided you have to film in Britain. It's a certain type of thing. To film in all types of places, there's certain type of crews you got to deal with. The guy who's doing this James Bond movies and all this jazz, he knows how Westerners like their stuff and still has an authentically Japanese perspective. So I think
you can do Jane Eyre and James Bond. What can't you do? You know,
Seriously.
You're not wrong, man. You are absolutely not wrong. Well, guys, wow, what a wild ride that was. And honestly, this is like one of our more kind of magical feeling movies as well. Like even the sci-fi in this has like a weird metaphysical bend. I kind of love it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it. We have achieved reboot. Woo! We are doing a big budget conceptual reboot of Ultraman where we are going full meta. Our main character is the grandson of a fictionalized version of the creator of Ultraman, a man who was burdened his entire life with dreams of other worlds and was canceled, to use George Lucas's terminology, for not being flexible enough with his own creation, for sticking so hard to these ideas that he first put down on paper in the 1960s. And it's because, unbeknownst to almost anyone in the 1960s, he actually merged with a real Ultraman entity, opened his mind to the multiverse, and was shown a reality beyond any of our wildest dreams, and spent the rest of his life trying to reconnect to that experience through his work. When he dies, he leaves a version of the Beta Capsule for his grandson to inherit, and the grandson doesn't know what to do with it, but early on discovers that these stories of connecting to Ultraman might be real. Goes on a journey where he has to connect to another super fan to whom he had sold pages, where he discovers that his grandfather was putting some sort of totemic ritual into the pages. And finding her allows him to access the talent to use the Beta Capsule to open the doorway to another dimension. Unfortunately, waiting on the other side is Ultraman Belial, Kaiser Belial, the evil Ultraman who is conquering all realities. And as it turns out, his origin is our universe. And the one thing you can't do in our universe, or so he always thought, was access Ultraman powers until Shin Hayata, or our fictionalized version of Shin Hayata. And so tricks the grandson into connecting to the Ultramind, opening the doorway for an invasion of our world for the first time in earnest. And so our young protagonist and his female artist sidekick have to go on an action-packed romp down the levels of different dimensions, through different monsters, in order to find Ultraman Alpha, trapped for the past 60 years, ever since he first connected to Shin Hayata. And in a unbelievably satisfying third act, our grandson character has discovered not only respect for his grandfather, respect for his grandfather's culture, but the ability to connect to the Ultramind in earnest. And he grows to 200 feet tall and just absolutely destroys a bunch of kaiju, although we're leaving Kaiser Belial alive for sequel opportunities. Woo! That is the pitch. There's a lot to flesh out. We're casting an all-authentic Japanese cast, and we have got Kari Joji Fukunaga, who is actually a Japanese director that fits the project perfectly in the director's chair. Mr. Lucas, we think that this might satisfy you. What do you think? That all sounds pretty good. I think it's okay. Probably not enough politics, but I see what you did there with the grandpa being canceled. But as it turns out, I no longer control the rights to Ultraman.
Sorry, what?
Yeah, you know how I said that I settled the whole dispute between Tsuburaya Productions and Chayo Productions? Turns out they weren't too satisfied with how it was settled, so I no longer own Ultraman. But listen, there's good news here. There's good news. Please tell me.
Okay.
I'm going to get my $3.5 billion back, so, no harm, no foul, right?
You want to loan me $100?
You'll have to talk to my business manager. I don't handle the money. You know, I've got too many other things going on.
Fair enough.
Makes sense. Sure. But listen, this was a really good time. You guys did some interesting stuff. I'm probably going to spend the next, I don't know, year and a half in Nice, in France. I might pop over to Barcelona, maybe do a little time in Greece, you know, but it'll really get the creative juices flowing. So, you know, maybe a year or two from now, we come back to it, we see where we're at. You know, it's no big deal, right? No big deal.
Yeah, for you.
Well, listen, you guys are great. Had a really good time. Again, I'm George. Nice to meet you. And hopefully our paths cross again sometime out in time and space. May the force be with you.
I hope your yachts don't nest right.
Oh.
Guys,
Look,
we've been doing this
before
for...
he hadn't ruined my childhood, but now he's ruined my childhood.
We've been doing this for weeks, man. Like, we're getting nowhere here. I think we just got to kind of call it. Like, we're not selling anything.
Oh, God.
We're going to give up? I mean, I guess...
Guys, we could always do the one meeting we said we would never do.
Bill,
No.
I told you about bringing that up. I told you we cannot do that. It violates everything that we're about, especially you, Bill. Don't give in. Don't capitulate to this ridiculousness, this cult of personality.
You guys know what's happening in Hollywood right now. Opportunities are shrinking. You got to go where the big names are because that's where all the money is going. And we have just struck out with 9 big names in a row. We literally don't have a studio left to pitch to. There is a huge name that we haven't been to yet. I'm just saying.
I mean, has he even called you back?
I was really hoping we could avoid that this time.
He called me back twice. I haven't called him back because I didn't want to do it. Are we going to do it?
Make the call.
Okay. Guys. Ugh.
I just threw up in my mouth.
Hold on to your butts because this is about to get real.